The hem of the wedding dress still bore rose petals at the church door when I was pushed by Ethan's bodyguard, my hands bound behind my back, into the attic of the mountain villa, the cold iron chains clamped onto my ankles as cheers rose from downstairs, the guests' applause and the announcer's booming voice. The announcer proclaimed, "Let us congratulate Mr. Ethan and Miss Melissa on their engagement." I clenched the pearl button on my wedding dress, my knuckles turning pale. 3 hours ago, Ethan was kneeling on one knee, sliding the diamond ring onto my hand, saying, "Wonwon, marry me, and I will make you the happiest woman in the world." The gentleness in his eyes back then, I now realize, was all a disguise of guilt toward another woman. The attic door slammed shut. The sound of the bolt echoing down the empty corridor. Ethan's voice came from outside the door, no longer the warmth of the wedding, only cold determination. Ethan said, "Wonwan. Manli has just returned from abroad. She's not well, she can't handle the shock. You stay here for these 2 years, until I've dealt with everything. I will give you an explanation." I did not speak, only walked to the narrow window and looked down. On the villa's lawn, Ethan was holding Melissa's hand, toasts to the guests. Melissa wore a pure white gown, with a winner's smile on her face, and her gaze seemed to pierce through the layers of windows, straight to me, carrying an unabashed challenge. I remember Melissa, she is Ethan's first love. She went abroad to study 3 years ago when she left, holding my hand and telling me to take good care of Ethan. At that time I was naive, truly thought she wished us well from the bottom of her heart. Now I know she was just leaving herself a way out. The creak of a door, an attic door, was pushed open. A servant carried a tray, placed it down, and hurried away without daring to look at me. The tray held only 2 dishes and a soup, with no meat or fish. I picked up the chopsticks, but I just couldn't swallow. Today was supposed to be my wedding day, yet I had become the most ridiculous prisoner in this villa. I don't know how long passed before the noise downstairs gradually subsided. Ethan finally came up, carrying a faint smell of alcohol and Melissa's usual perfume. He stood about 3 steps away from me, looking at my creased wedding dress. Frowning, Ethan said, "Wonwan. Change into another dress. The servants prepared you different clothes." I still didn't speak, only looked up, gazing straight at him. The man I had loved for 5 years had, at our wedding, locked me up for the sake of his first love. His eyes flickered with a trace of guilt, but it was soon replaced by determination. Ethan said, "Manli went abroad for me back then because she got seriously ill. I can't hurt her any longer." Serious illness. I finally spoke, my voice hoarse with excitement. "She was downstairs laughing and chatting just now, and looked healthier than me." "Ethan, you deceived me." Ethan's face darkened. He stepped forward, trying to grab my wrist, and I jerked back, evading his touch. His hand froze in midair, and his tone grew colder. Ethan said, "Wonwan, stop messing around. Be good for these 2 years. I won't mistreat you." Underrating me. I laughed, tears almost welling up, locking me in this sunless attic, watching you sleep with other women. "Is that what you call not undervaluing me? Ethan, you really disgust me." Ethan's face darkened completely, and he pointed at the door, growling, "You'd better recognize your place. Stay here properly, and if you dare cause trouble for Manli, I won't let you leave in one piece." After saying this, he slammed the door and left, leaving me alone in the attic, facing the suffocating silence of the room. In the days that followed, I became the invisible man of this hilltop villa. Except for the servants who delivered meals every day, I saw no one. The attic windows were welded with iron bars, and the door was locked from the outside. I was like a bird kept in a cage, having lost all freedom. Melissa had indeed come once. She wore a luxury dress, holding a delicate handbag in her hand. Looking down at me, Melissa said, "Ava, I know you're not satisfied, but the person Xian loves has always been me. If I hadn't gone abroad back then, you wouldn't have had a chance to marry her." I sat on the edge of the bed, fiddling with a hairpin in my hand. The first gift Ethan gave me. I didn't look at her, I just said softly, "Just because he's nice to you now doesn't mean he will be in the future." Melissa's face changed as if someone had touched a sore spot. She stepped forward, grabbed the hairpin from my hand, slammed it to the ground, and crushed it under her high heels. Melissa said, "Ava, stop stirring trouble here. Zi Yang would even change the wedding for me. How could he ever betray me? On the contrary, you stay up in this attic and stop daydreaming. I looked at the scattered hairpins on the ground, and not a single ripple of emotion stirred in my heart. Since Ethan locked me in, my love for him had already died. I raised my head and looked at Melissa, a cold smile curling at the corners of my mouth, and I said, "Melissa, you wait. One day, I will make you all pay for everything you did today." Melissa was startled back by my gaze, then quickly composed herself and said, "You an inmate? You dare to talk such big words? I think you've gone crazy from being locked up." After saying this, she strode off in a fit of anger, and before leaving, she ordered the servants not to give me any chance to speak in the future. Since then, the servants would leave immediately after delivering the meals, not even sparing me a single glance. I began to search the attic for anything I could use. And I found a pile of old newspapers and magazines in a corner, along with a discarded fountain pen. I took the pen apart, removed the nib, and hid it under the pillow. Then I gathered the newspapers and magazines, secretly torn them into strips, and hid them in the gaps of the bedboard. I know that Ethan won't lock me up for life, but I can't just sit and wait for death. I must stay alive, wait for the day of my revenge, every morning, through the slivers of light that come in from the window. I will record in a note the every move of Ethan and Melissa, although I cannot see them. From the servants' bits of and the sounds from downstairs, I can guess to some extent. 1 month later, Ethan came. He was still dressed in a sharp suit, but his face looked worse than last time. He sat in the chair opposite me and remained silent for a long while before speaking. Ethan said, "Wonwan, Manli is pregnant. I hope you can help us achieve this." I looked up at him. My gaze as calm as a still pool. I said nothing, only pulled out a note from the gap in the bedboard, on which was written, "Melissa went to the hospital for a prenatal checkup last week, accompanied by a stranger." I placed the note in front of him. Ethan's face immediately turned deathly pale. "How would you know?" he asked in a choked voice, "that which no one should know, unless you yourself do not do it?" I said lightly, "Ethan, you think locking me up can hide all truths? Melissa is not a good person at all. She just treats you as a cash machine." Ethan suddenly stood up, grabbed my wrist tightly, his eyes fierce. Ethan said, "Ava, don't talk nonsense. Manli isn't that kind of person." I forcefully shook off his hand, and my wrist was reddened where he grabbed me. I sneered and said, "Whether I'm talking nonsense, you know it in your heart. If you don't believe it, you can visit the hospital tomorrow and ask who accompanied Melissa for the prenatal checkup." Ethan's eyes flickered uncertainly as he looked at me, as if trying to read my face to see whether I was lying. After a long while, he sank down dejectedly, his tone carrying a hint of fatigue, and Ethan said, "Wonwan, no matter what, you stay here for these 2 years. After the baby is born, I will give you a satisfactory answer." I ignored him again, turning my back on him. He uttered a few more insignificant words, and seeing that I did not respond, he stood up and left, watching his departing back. The smile at the corner of my mouth grew colder. Percent Ethan, this is only the beginning. Your retribution is still to come. In the days to come, I continued to quietly gather strength in the attic. I practiced writing with old newspapers to make my handwriting different from before. I used the pretext of exercising to build up my strength. I also coaxed information from the servants to learn about the villa's layout and Ethan's company. I know that only by having enough information can I strike a lethal blow when I exact my revenge. And Ethan, as always, comes once a month. Each time he comes, he brings me some daily necessities, sometimes even a book. He seems to want to make amends for his guilt in this way, but I know his guilt is fake. He's just afraid that if I go out, I will ruin his and Melissa's happy life. Every time he came, I would pretend to be taciturn, and I would occasionally say a few words, deliberately provoking the relationship between him and Melissa. I know Melissa is naturally suspicious. As long as I fan the flames a little, they would have conflicts. Sure enough, not long after, I heard from the servants that Ethan and Melissa often quarreled over small matters, and their relationship grew increasingly strained. I know my opportunity is approaching, but I am not anxious. I will wait for the most suitable moment to deliver the heaviest blow to them. I continue to wait in the attic. Like a concealed predator, waiting for the moment when the prey reveals a flaw, Ethan, when he came to the attic for the 5th time, the red blood vessels in his eyes were clearly visible. And the lapel of his suit was a bit crooked. He placed a delicate jewelry box in front of me and pushed it over, his fingers trembling, and Ethan said, "WN, this is what Man Lee asked me to give you, as compensation." I glanced at the diamond necklace in that box, then sneered coldly and didn't take it. Melissa, this bait-and-switch tactic is really lousy. Obviously she's afraid I'll go out and ruin her plans, yet she pretends to be magnanimous. I picked up the Along the Bed old magazine that was torn and tattered, pretending to focus on the financial section on it. Not even lifting my eyelids, Ethan's face sank, and he sat down in the chair opposite me, clearing his throat. Manley has been suffering from severe morning sickness lately and isn't in a good mood. Don't take what she said last time to heart. I finally looked up at him, and with a finger I pointed to the stock chart of the Lin Group on the magazine. My voice as calm as if I were talking about someone else. Lin's stock has fallen by 30%. Is it because Melissa embezzled public funds to buy a house for her younger brother? Ethan's face suddenly went pale, and he stood up abruptly, the chair leg scraping loudly on the floor. Ethan said, "How did you know? Who told you? Those who know others' secrets should not know them if you do nothing." I threw the magazine on the table, stood up, and walked in front of him, looking down on him from a superior height. For the past 2 years I have trained daily with the old dumbbells in the attic, and my figure is no longer the frail one of before. "Ava, do you think locking me here means I know nothing? The person who brings me meals every day is my distant relative." Ethan's pupils suddenly dilated. He staggered back a step, pointing at me for a long time, speechless. I sneered and continued, "Melissa not only embezzled funds, but also has an unclear relationship with your company's vice president. Last time she went for a prenatal check, who was by her side wasn't you at all, it was that vice president." "Right, no way, Manley isn't that kind of person." "Ethan," he roared like a trapped animal cornered, "you're lying. You're trying to drive a wedge between me and Manley." I fished a stack of photos from under the bedboard and slammed them onto his face. The photos scattered everywhere, all showing Melissa and that vice president embracing at the hotel entrance and going into the obstetrics and gynecology department together. Ethan squatted on the floor, picking them up one by one to look, his hands trembling more and more, tears sliding down his cheeks. "These are all secretly photographed by Aunt Jong." I leaned against the window, watching the fallen leaves outside, with no fluctuation in my tone. "Ethan, you have locked me up for 2 years for the sake of a woman like this. Look at yourself now. Do you look like a joke?" Ethan suddenly cried on the ground with his head in his hands, wailing and full of despair and remorse. I watched him this way, and there wasn't a shred of sympathy in my heart, only the thrill of revenge slowly growing. After crying for about 10 minutes, he stood up abruptly, grabbed my arm, his eyes carrying a hint of madness. "Ethan says, Wanwan, I know I was wrong. Can you help me? If you help me save the company and drive that bitch Manley away, I'll let you go, and we'll start over." I forcefully shook off his hand and wiped my arm with disgust, and I said, "Start over, Ethan, do you deserve it? 2 years ago when you locked me here, why didn't you think about today?" Ethan stared in place, his expression changing from frenzy to defeat. He was silent for a long time before he whispered, "I know I owe you an apology. But the Lin Group is my father's lifelong dream. I cannot let it be ruined in Melissa's hands. If you help me, I'm willing to pay any price." I looked at him, a calculating smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. I knew my opportunity had come. I pretended to hesitate, and said, "You can help me, but you have to agree to 2 conditions. First, give me freedom, let me move around the villa freely, and stop locking me in the attic. Second, transfer 30% of the Lin Group's shares to me, as compensation." Ethan frowned, seeming a bit hesitant. I sneered, turned to walk back to the bed, and said, "If you won't agree, then forget it. After all, if the Lin Group goes bankrupt, the one who suffers the most is you, not me." "I'll agree." Ethan hastily grabbed me, his tone urgent. "I'll agree. Tomorrow I'll transfer the shares to you, and I'll also unlock the attic lock, so you can move freely in the villa." I nod in satisfaction and say, "Very good. Bring me the share transfer agreement tomorrow to sign, and I'll tell you how to save the Lin Group." Ethan, if forgiven, he quickly nodded and bowed, saying, Okay, I'll bring it tomorrow. Thank you for willing to help me." Looking at his joyful departing figure, the smile on my face instantly disappeared, replaced by a cold, killing intent. "Ethan, do you think I'm helping you? I'm steadily pushing you toward the abyss, ensuring your perpetual damnation." The next morning, Ethan indeed brought the share transfer agreement. After I carefully read it through and confirmed there were no issues, I signed my name. The moment I obtained the share transfer document, a weight on my heart finally lifted halfway. Now, I am the second largest shareholder of the Lin Group, possessing the capital to contend with Ethan. "Now you can tell me how to save the Lin Group, right?" Ethan asked urgently. I pulled him aside and whispered, "Melissa has embezzled funds, and I have already collected the evidence. You can first dismiss that vice president, then prosecute Melissa for embezzlement, and recover the embezzled funds. In this way, not only can we recover the company's losses, but we can also give the shareholders an explanation, and the stock will naturally rebound." Ethan's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly said, "Yes, this method is great. Wonwan, you're really smart." I patted his shoulder and said, "There's no time to lose. Go handle it now. Remember, you must do it cleanly and decisively, leaving no chance for Melissa to retaliate." Ethan nodded, then turned and hurriedly left. Watching his departing silhouette, the smile at the corner of my mouth grew colder. From that day on, I could finally move freely in the villa. I moved the things from the attic to a guest room on the first floor, a room with good lighting and a wide view. I began to observe the layout of the villa carefully, looking for clues I could use. Who had regained her freedom also cheered for me. She whispered to me that Melissa had recently been cold toward Ethan, often throwing temper at home and smashing many valuable items. After hearing this, I felt secretly pleased. It seemed that Ethan had already started to act according to my plan. Indeed, not long after, news came that Melissa had been sued by Ethan. Melissa rushed to the villa to confront Ethan, only to be bumped into by me. She wore a bright red dress, her hair in disarray, her face smeared with makeup, looking like a shrew. "Ethan, you ungrateful thing. I've done so much for you, and you actually sue me," Melissa roared, rushing into the living room to hit Ethan. Ethan grabbed her wrist, his eyes cold, and said, "Melissa, you embezzled company funds, and you're involved with another man in a murky situation, and you still have the nerve to come here to cause trouble. I've already been lenient enough not to ruin your reputation." "I didn't. Those are all Ava fabricating lies about me." Melissa turned her head, glaring at me with sharp eyes. "Ava, it's you who instigated my relationship with Ziyi Yang. It's you who framed me. I will kill you." Melissa broke free from Ethan's hand and lunged toward me. I was prepared, sidestepped, then delivered a kick to her stomach. Melissa let out a horrific scream, collapsed to the ground, clutching her belly and groaning in pain. "Melissa, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want." I walked up to her, looking down at her from a superior vantage point. "The evidence of embezzlement is solid, and those photos with the Deputy General are not clear or ambiguous. You still want to argue?" Ethan also walked up to her, throwing a stack of evidence in her face, and Ethan said, "These are all the evidence. Look for yourself." "Melissa, we're done for." Melissa looked at the evidence, her face turning pale, and she could no longer utter a word. After a moment, she suddenly burst into laughter, tears streaming down her face. Melissa said, "Ethan, Ava, you two shouldn't celebrate too early. I also have your handles in my hands. If I die, you won't have it easy either." I glanced at Ethan and we both saw confusion in each other's eyes. "Melissa, what exactly is she holding?" I felt a chill of suspicion rise inside me. Ethan frowned and said, "Melissa, stop acting mysterious here. If you have something to hold on to, bring it out." Melissa let out a cold laugh and said, "I will not tell you, unless you drop the lawsuit against me and give me some money to let me go abroad." Ethan's face sank, and just as he was about to speak, I stopped him. I looked at Melissa, a meaningfully sly smile tugging at the corners of my mouth, and I said, "Melissa, Is the handle in your hand connected to the car accident from 3 years ago? Melissa's face instantly paled, and she suddenly looked up at me, her eyes filled with shock and fear. Melissa said, How did you know? My heart skipped a beat, and it seems I was right to guess. 3 years ago, Ethan's father died in a car accident. The police ruled it an accident at the time. But I always felt there was more to it. Now it seems the accident is related to Melissa. I don't know how important that is. I walked up to Melissa, crouched down, and looked into her eyes. Melissa, tell me everything you know. I can get Ethan to drop the charges against you, and I can give you money to go abroad. Otherwise, I'll ruin your reputation and you'll be behind bars for life. Melissa looked at me, her eyes filled with struggle. After a long while, she grit her teeth and said, Fine, I'll tell you. The car accident 3 years ago wasn't an accident. It was planned by me and Ethan together. Me and Ethan were stunned. I didn't expect that. Ethan had actually that car accident. Ethan's face turned pale. He pointed to Melissa, shouting, Melissa, you're lying. I didn't. I'm not lying at all. Melissa also yelled, Back then, your father didn't want us to be together, and even wanted to hand the company over to Ava's brother to manage. To seize control of the company. You and I planned that car accident together. You were driving toward your father's car, and I was helping you watch for trouble from the side. Ethan stumbled backward a step, slumping to the ground, his eyes filled with despair and fear. I watched him like this, and the hatred in my heart grew stronger. It turns out that not only was I imprisoned by him for 2 years, my brother lost his right of inheritance. And my father's company was taken by him, all orchestrated by none other than him. Ethan, you really disgust me. I clenched my teeth. Word by word I spoke, for power and women you even wouldn't spare your own father. You are not human. Ethan, holding his head, squatted on the ground, wailing and crying loudly. Melissa looked at him, a smug smile playing at the corners of her mouth, and said, Ava, now you know, right? Ethan is just a heartless, satanic devil. If you dare to report us, I will leak this matter and bring Lynn Group to a complete collapse. I sneered and stood up and said, Do you think I'll be afraid? Ethan, Melissa, your apocalypse has arrived. I took out my phone and pressed the stop recording button. What Melissa just said, I recorded all of it. This is the strongest evidence. Enough to ruin their reputation and lock them up behind bars. Ethan and Melissa looked at the phone in my hand, their faces turning pale at once. They finally realized they had fallen into the trap I set. Melissa, after she reacted, charged at me as if to seize my phone. I had anticipated it, sidestepping while lifting my leg to deliver a hard kick to her knee. With a crisp crack, Melissa let out and collapsed to the ground. Hugging her knee and trembling with pain, Ethan also crawled up from the ground, his eyes bloodshot as he stared at me, like a beast on the verge of rampage. I met his gaze fearlessly, shook the phone in my hand, and said, Ethan, if you dare to touch me even slightly, I will send the recording to the police and major media right now. At that time, you will not only lose the Lynn Group but also bear the crime of killing your father, and you'll rot in jail. Ethan's movements froze in midair, his expression changing from anger to fear. He knew I was speaking the truth. Once the recording is exposed, he would be finished. Ava, we have something to talk about properly. Ethan's tone softened, with a hint of pleading. As long as you delete the recording, I'll give you anything you want. Money, shares, the company. I can give you everything. I want what you can't give. I sneered. I want you to pay for the car accident from that year. I want you to pay for imprisoning me for these 2 years. I want you and Melissa to be ruined, both in reputation and in life. Melissa, enduring the pain, looked up at me with a resentful gaze. Melissa said, Ava, don't be too. Actually, translation, Ava, don't get so cocky. Even if you have a recording, so what? As long as I bite and claim you forced me to lie, the police won't easily believe you. Is that so? I took out another phone from my pocket and shook it. In our conversation just now, I not only recorded the audio, but also the video. The video clearly captures you admitting to and planning the car accident with Ethan. Who do you think the police will believe? Melissa and Ethan's faces completely turned pale, and they knew this time they were really in trouble. I looked at their expressions, and the pleasure of revenge in my heart grew stronger and stronger. But I didn't call the police immediately. I wanted them to taste the pain I've endured for the past 2 years and then pay the price. Lock them both up, I shouted toward the doorway. Soon, Mrs. Jong came in with a few strong, sturdy bodyguards. These bodyguards were all connected to me through Mrs. Jong. They had been my father's subordinates and were loyal to me. Ethan and Melissa still want to resist, but they are not a match for the bodyguards at all and are quickly subdued. The bodyguards drag them into the attic and lock them up with iron chains. Before leaving, I walk to the attic door, look at them, and say, "The suffering I've endured in this attic these 2 years, I will make you repay it twice over." The moment the door closed, I heard Melissa's curses and Ethan's pleas, but I showed no mercy at all. This is exactly what they deserve. In the days that followed, I began managing the Lin Group's affairs. Because Ethan was locked up by me, the company was leaderless, and the stock price kept plummeting. As the second biggest shareholder, I convened the shareholders' meeting, where I revealed Melissa's embezzlement of funds. And part of the evidence that Ethan was suspected of masterminding the car accident, I did not reveal all of it. To keep a card up my sleeve, shareholders were in an uproar, all demanding the removal of Ethan from the position of chairman. I took the opportunity to propose that I temporarily assume the chairmanship and oversee the daily affairs of the company, because I held leverage over Ethan and Melissa, and the reform proposal I presented was approved by the majority of shareholders. My proposal passed smoothly. After becoming the acting chairman of the Lin Group, I began to reform with decisive moves. I first fired Melissa and the deputy general manager, then promoted a batch of capable employees who are loyal to the company. I also personally visited several important clients of the company, and with my ability and sincerity, I recovered a lot of losses. While handling company matters, I did not forget Ethan and Melissa in the attic. I told the servants to bring them only 1 meal a day, and even that would be the worst-tasting coarse-grained steamed buns and pickles. I want them to experience what it feels like to be imprisoned and mistreated. There was an occasion when I went to the attic to see them. Ethan and Melissa were crouched in a corner, their clothes dirty and torn, faces all worn and gaunt. When they saw me come in, Ethan hurried over, lay down on the ground, and kowtowed to me, saying, "Wonwan, I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong, please forgive me. I won't dare again in the future." Melissa also kowtows. Melissa says, "Ava, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have and Ethan together harmed you. I shouldn't have stirred up your relationship. Just let us go, we will never appear before you again." I looked at their kowtowing, pathetic. And there was not the slightest pity in my heart, only disgust. I crouched down and patted Ethan's face, and said, "Ethan, when you locked me here back then, did you ever think about today? Remember this, what you owe me, you will never be able to repay in this lifetime." After saying that, I turned and walked away, not glancing at them again. I know this punishment is far from enough. I will make them lose not only their freedom and wealth but also their dignity, so that they spend the rest of their lives in despair. One day, while I was organizing the files in Ethan's office, I found a locked drawer. I tried many passwords, but none opened it. Finally, I used Ethan's father's birthday as the password, and the drawer opened. Inside was a black box. I opened the box, and inside were a videotape and a will. I put the videotape into the player, and the image that appeared was Ethan's father. He sat at his desk, looking stern, and spoke to the camera. "I know Ziyi Yang has always wanted to seize control of the company, and he might even resort to unscrupulous means to achieve his goal. If I were to have an accident, it would surely be Ziyi Yang's doing. I had prepared this will in advance, and I willingly transfer all the shares of Lin Group to Ava's brother Michael, hoping he can manage the company well and not let it fall into Ziyi Yang's hands." After watching the video, I was in tears. It turns out that Ethan's father had known all along about Ethan's ambition to protect the company. He even made a will in advance, transferring the shares to my brother, and Ethan's orchestrating that car accident was to prevent the will from taking effect. I held the will and the videotape and found my brother, Michael. After seeing these things, my brother was very moved as well. He had always believed Uncle's death was an accident, never imagining that Ethan did it. My brother gripped my hand tightly and said, "Wano, thank you Thank you for avenging Uncle and for avenging our GU family. Brother, this is all I should do. I wiped away my tears and said, Ethan and Melissa owe us. We will make them repay it twice over. After discussing with my brother, we decided to first have complete control over the Lin Group and then report it to the authorities to have Ethan and Melissa brought to justice. We began secretly contacting the old employees and shareholders who were loyal to Ethan's father to win their support. With our efforts, more and more people are on our side. Ethan is losing power in the company, almost reduced to an empty shell of a chairman, and Melissa has been wanted by the police for embezzlement. She has not been caught only because I locked her in the attic. The time was ripe. I held a shareholders' meeting with my older brother, and at the meeting, we revealed the complete evidence that Ethan plotted the car accident, including recordings, videos, surveillance tapes, and a will. The shareholders were utterly furious and demanded that Ethan be brought to justice. We called the police on the spot, and the police quickly rushed to the scene, bringing Ethan out from the attic. Seeing the police, Ethan completely broke down, struggling and shouting, I didn't kill anyone, I didn't. It was Ava who framed me, it was her. The evidence was conclusive, and the police did not listen to his explanation at all, directly putting him in handcuffs and taking him away. Melissa was also taken away by the police on charges of embezzlement and suspected involvement in murder. Watching their backs as they were taken away, my brother and I exchanged a relieved smile, our eyes filled with calm. But I know in my heart, this is not the end. I always feel that the stuff in Ethan's father's encrypted drawer in the office is more than just a videotape and a will. After all, this hillside villa was designed personally by Ethan's father. And there may be other secrets hidden. After handling the company's urgent matters, I immediately returned to the villa and began to search every nook carefully. Aunt Jong stood by to help me. She has been with our family for many years and knows a bit about the Larolin family's affairs. Aunt Jong said, Miss, the old master always said there's something strange in the villa's basement, but he never let outsiders get close, not even Ethan. My eyes lit up. And I led Aunt Jong toward the basement at once. The basement door is hidden behind a bookshelf in the study. On the shelf sits a row of fine books, and I tried to pull out the middle book, 100 Years of Solitude. The shelf creaked and moved aside, revealing a heavy iron door. The iron door had no keyhole, only a password keypad. I entered Ethan's father's birthday, but the password was wrong. I tried both my and my brother's birthdays, and it was still wrong. Just when I was about to give up, I suddenly remembered the Manly mentioned in the videotape by Ethan's father. That time Melissa hadn't gone abroad yet, and the old man's impression of her wasn't good. I held a try-it attitude and entered Melissa's birthday. The keyboard gave a soft ding, and the iron door slowly opened. In the basement it was pitch dark. I turned on my phone flashlight, and wherever the light reached, there were heaps of old boxes. The innermost area contained a sealed chamber made of steel plates, and a large brass lock hung on the chamber door. I asked Aunt Jong to fetch a crowbar. After great effort, we pried the lock open. When the door swung open, both Aunt Jong and I gasped at the chilly air. The walls of the sealed chamber were covered with photos. All of Melissa's photos, from her girlhood to before she left the country. And there were even a few intimate photos of her with different men. One of them happened to be a photo of her with Ethan's father. In the photos, Melissa looked provocative, leaning into Ethan's father, her smile bewitching. Besides the photos, a metal box lay in the corner. I opened the box and found a stack of letters and a videotape labeled The Car Crash Scene. I trembled as I inserted the videotape into the portable player we brought. The initial footage showed a blurry rainy night. With the camera aimed at Ethan's father's car, suddenly, a black sedan shot out from the side and crashed directly into the driver's side. After the impact, the driver of the black sedan got out to check, and it turned out to be Ethan. He moved to the passenger seat, opened the door. Melissa stepped out from inside. They exchanged a few quiet words, and then Ethan called the police. Melissa pretended to be a bystander on the side. What shocked me even more was that the second half of the videotape contained Ethan's father's dying declaration. He lay on the hospital bed, his breath faint, and facing the camera he said, Ziyi Yang, Manly instigated it. She clutches the handle of the illness. I am sorry to the GU family." Before he could finish his sentence, the screen went black. I picked up those letters and read them one by one, and the truth gradually surfaced. It turns out that Melissa knew Ethan's father as early as when she was 18. At that time, her family owed a huge gambling debt, and Ethan's father helped her pay it back, and the two became entangled as a result. Later, Ethan's father wanted to end it, and Melissa used their intimate photos to threaten him, even instigating Ethan, saying that the old man would hand the company over to the GU family, ensuring he would never have a chance to rise again. "Miss, this is too terrifying." Jong Ma's face went pale. Melissa is really such a person, and Ethan was also deceived by her, cheated. I sneered coldly, slipping the letter and the videotape into my bag. If he were truly filial, how could he lay a hand on his biological father over just a few instigations? He's merely using Melissa as an excuse to satisfy his own ambitions. Just then my phone rang. It was the police station. The cops said Ethan and Melissa are biting at each other in the interrogation room. Melissa claimed the car accident was Ethan's master plan and she was merely forced to participate. Ethan said he was being threatened by Melissa and even produced evidence of Melissa embezzling funds. The two argued endlessly and hoped I could provide more evidence. I rushed to the police station and handed the photos, letters, and videotapes found in the secret room to the police. After the detective in charge of the case finished reviewing the evidence, he spoke solemnly. "GU, these pieces of evidence are crucial. We can immediately prosecute Melissa for attempted murder and extortion. And Ethan's murder charge can also be fully substantiated." I proposed to speak alone with Ethan, Melissa, and detective hesitated for a moment but agreed. I first went to see Melissa. She was wearing prison clothes, her hair was a mess, and she no longer had her former grace. When she saw me come in, she rushed to the iron bars and roared, "Ava, it was you who harmed me. You handed those things to the police because you wanted me dead." I leaned against the wall, coldly looking at her. "Melissa, you have to bear the consequences of what you did. Do you think that holding a photo of Ethan's father can threaten others for a lifetime? You provoked Ethan to kill his father, embezzled funds, and had affairs with multiple men. These are all paths you chose. I was forced to," Melissa cried, tears mixing with the dirt on her face, looking particularly pitiful. "My family owes so much money, and Ethan's father forced me to be his mistress. I had no other choice either. Later I wanted to get away from him, but he threatened to ruin me. So I provoked Ziyi Yang. People who are cornered can kill, can ruin others' families." I stepped forward, my eyes cold. "Do you remember 3 years ago before you went abroad, when you held my hand and asked me to take good care of Ethan? Back then, you were already planning to leave a way out for yourself, waiting to come back to steal someone else's husband. The child in your belly isn't Ethan's at all. It's the vice president's, right?" Melissa's face turned pale in an instant. She slumped to the ground, unable to utter another word. I turned away from the interrogation room to go meet Ethan. Ethan was much calmer than Melissa. He sat on the chair, his head buried in his knees. He heard the footsteps and slowly lifted his head. "Wonwan, I know I was wrong." His voice was hoarse, his eyes full of bloodshot veins. "I shouldn't have listened to Melissa. I shouldn't have killed my father. And I definitely shouldn't have locked you up. Can you give me another chance? I'll return the Lin group to you and your brother. I'll go to prison. I just ask you to forgive me." I looked at his contrite, regretful look, and there was not a trace of stirred emotion in my heart. I pulled out my phone and played a recording. The words he shouted at me back then when he locked me in the attic, "You'd better recognize your place, stay here properly, and if you dare cause trouble for Manli, I'll make sure you go under with no way out." When the recording finished, I slipped the phone back into my pocket and said, "Ethan, you didn't err by listening to Melissa. Your mistake lies in having too much ambition, in being cold and ruthless. Your father trusted you so much and handed the company to you to manage. Yet you killed him to seize power. I loved you so much, walked beside you for 5 years, and you imprisoned me for 2 years for another woman. Do you think a single I was wrong can erase all the hurt?" Ethan suddenly stood up, grabbed the iron railing, and roared, "So what do you want? I've already lost everything. What more do you want from me? I want you to pay for your actions. I turned and walked toward the door. The law will give you a fair trial. And the souls of my Father and your Father in heaven will also watch you receive the deserved retribution. After leaving the police station, my older brother came to pick me up in the car. In the car, he handed me a cup of hot coffee and said, "Wonwan, it's all over. The shareholders of the Lin Group have agreed that I should become chairman. From now on, you should rest well and not worry about these things anymore." I watched the stream of cars outside the window, and tears finally couldn't be held back. The humiliation, pain, and hatred of the past 2 years finally found some closure at this moment. But I know I can't just let it go. Melissa and Ethan, although they will face legal punishment, the injuries they caused me, I will make them suffer in prison for all eternity. Back at the villa, I had Aunt Jong organize the vault's contents, copied many copies of those photos and letters, and mailed them to the prison guards and other prisoners. I also had someone pass a message to the big brother in the prison, asking them to take good care of Melissa and Ethan. It wasn't long before I received news. Melissa was injured on her face after fighting with other female prisoners over belongings, and Ethan, for refusing to obey the guards, was put in solitary confinement. After taking care of these matters, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. I sold the hillside villa and used the proceeds to establish a charitable foundation dedicated to helping women who have suffered domestic violence or captivity. My brother also ran the Lin Group smoothly and even expanded into several new business areas. The company's market value had multiplied many times over. One day I visited the foundation for an inspection and met a girl who had a similar experience. She had been imprisoned by her husband for a year and barely escaped. Seeing her felt like seeing myself from 2 years earlier. I held her hand and said, "Don't be afraid, from now on, with us here, no one can harm you again." The girl cried and said to me, "Jiu Jia, thank you, if it weren't for you, I really wouldn't know what to do." Watching the girl's grateful eyes, I suddenly understood that revenge is not the goal. Stepping out of the shadows and helping more people is the most powerful counterattack against those who hurt me. Just as I thought life had finally returned to normal, I received a letter from the prison, written by Ethan. The letter contained no apology, no pleas, only one sentence: "Ava, I'm waiting for you in hell." I threw the letter into the trash, a cold smile curling at the corners of my mouth. "Ethan, you stay in hell where you belong. I will live on earth better than anyone." That night, I received a call from the police station. Detective said Ethan tried to commit suicide in prison, was rescued, and is still in the hospital being treated. I did not go to the hospital, only lightly told detective, "If he wants to die, it's not that easy. Please watch him closely and don't let him get into trouble again." I hung up the phone. I walked to the balcony, looking at the bright moon in the sky. The moonlight shines on me, warm and gentle. I know that the past has passed, and there are still many wonderful things waiting for me in the future. I am no longer the Ava who was imprisoned in the attic. I am Ava. I am Ava. I am the reborn Ava. The detective's call had ended not 10 minutes ago, when suddenly the villa's fire alarm went off. I stood on the balcony looking down and saw black smoke billowing from the direction of the study, flames licking the window panes, making a crackling, popping sound. "Mrs. Jong ran up in a panic, grabbing my arm and pulling me down the stairs. "Mrs. Jong said, 'Miss, it's on fire. Quick, follow me through the safety passage.' I deliberately tripped over my feet, pretending to fall in a panic, and rolled the gasoline bottle hidden in my skirt into the pile of debris at the corner of the stairs. The gasoline exploded instantly when heated, and flames leaped up the stairs, completely blocking the path to the safety passage. I crouched on the ground with my head in my hands, crying in a choked voice, "Aunt Jong, what should we do? The road is blocked." Aunt Jong was so anxious she stamped her feet. Then her eyes suddenly brightened, and she pointed toward the attic. "Miss, there's a skylight in the attic. When the old master was alive, he left it there. It leads to the roof. We'll go through there." I secretly smirked. This was exactly my plan. I held Aunt Jong's hand and staggered toward the attic. As I passed the living room, I deliberately glanced at the surveillance camera blurred by the thick smoke. The scene of my earlier fall would surely have been captured clearly. In the attic, Ethan and Melissa had long been coughing from smoke, chains clanking loudly as they scraped on the ground. Seeing us come in, Melissa lunged forward as if grabbing a lifeline, and through the iron bars she roared, "Ava, take me with you. Hurry and take me away. I'll pay you. I'll give you all my money." I ignored her completely, letting Aunt Jong step on a pre-moved wooden box to open the skylight. The wind on the roof was strong, and with a single gust it blew the thick smoke into the attic. Ethan's face was scorched and black, tears and snot mingling. He crawled over and grabbed the hem of my pants. Ethan said, "Wonwan, I was wrong. I really was wrong. You rescue me out. I'll give you all of Lin Group, please." I raised my foot and kicked him away, looking down on him and Melissa struggling in the blaze, my voice as cold as forged poison. "Ethan, Melissa, this fire is for burying you. Back then when you locked me up here, did you ever think there would be a day like this?" After saying that, I turned and stepped on a wooden box to climb up to the skylight. With Mrs. Jong close behind, I pressed the remote control on my phone from the roof, and the attic door automatically locked with a click. This was something I had secretly modified long ago, just to cut off their escape today. The roof connected to the gentle slope at the back of the mountain, and with Aunt Jong, I slid down along the rope that had been tied beforehand. At the foot of the hill, an inconspicuous van was already parked. The driver was a long-time acquaintance arranged by my brother, and as soon as he saw us come down, he started the car. I looked back through the car window. The hillside villa had already been swallowed by the flames, red firelight lighting up half the sky, and I could faintly hear the sirens of fire engines coming from somewhere in the distance. "Madam, everything has been done according to your plan." Mrs. Jong handed me a glass of water, and still held a black briefcase in her hand. "The evidence is all inside, none missing. Also the fake identity documents you wanted have all been prepared." I took the briefcase. Inside were the car accident scene videotapes, letters and photos from Melissa and Ethan's father, and a complete set of new identification papers. Shin-chan, a Chinese overseas businessman who had just returned from abroad. The van drove all the way to the port, and a private yacht was waiting for us. When I boarded the yacht, I looked back at the direction of the shore, the lights of fire engines and police cars flashing all around. Percent Ethan and Melissa should have already been rescued, right? But it doesn't matter, even if they're alive. They will only be treated as victims of this fire. And Ava has already perished in the blaze in the attic, buried by the flames, after the yacht left the port. I had Jong Ma throw into the sea the relics prepared in advance. That was a pearl earring I frequently wore, and a small piece of wedding dress fabric. These things would be found by the fishermen tomorrow, and by then the news that Ava is dead would be completely substantiated. I leaned against the yacht's railing and looked at the moonlight reflected on the sea, with no trace of attachment in my heart, only the relief and the pleasure of revenge. 3 days later, I saw news about that fire in a hotel in a neighboring city. On the television, Ethan was wearing an inpatient gown, his face scarred, crying in front of the camera, saying, "It's all my fault. I locked Wonwan in the attic, and that's why she couldn't escape. I'm sorry for her." Melissa stood by him, her face also lightly burned. She was holding Ethan's arm, her eyes red-rimmed, and she said, "Xian and I will take good care of Ava's family and make up for our mistakes." I was gently swaying the coffee cup in my hand, and a few drops splashed onto the tablecloth. What a good performance it is. Clearly desperate for my death, yet now pretending to be deeply affectionate. The news also said that the Lin Group's stock price plunged due to this fire and the previous scandal. Shareholders were panicking, and Ethan was stabilizing the situation with the grief over losing his beloved wife. Melodrama. Miss Shin. The letter of intent for cooperation with the Lin Group has already been sent over. The assistant handed me the tablet, on which was Lin Group's latest cooperation proposal, inviting the mysterious Chinese-American investor Shin-chan. I sneered, tapping on the screen with my finger, and replied, "Agree to the face-to-face meeting. The time and place will be decided by us." A week later, in the conference room of a 5-star hotel, I met Ethan in the identity of Shin-chan. He wore an expensive suit, his burn scars had crusted over, but there was a faint weariness in his eyes that lingered. When he saw me, he was noticeably stunned, probably thinking that the features between Shin-chan resembled Ava, who had died a little. "Miss Shin, I've heard a lot about you." Ethan stretched out his hand, forcing a polite smile on his face. "I didn't expect Miss Shin to be so young, truly young and capable." I gave him a symbolic handshake, but withdrew my fingers as soon as they touched his skin, and spoke flatly. "Mr. Lin, you're too polite. I'm just lucky. But the Lin Group's recent situation seems not very good." Ethan's face stiffened for a moment, and he hurriedly explained, "It's only a temporary difficulty. The fire and the previous scandal have affected the stock price, but the company's foundation remains. As long as Miss Shun is willing to invest, we can recover soon." I pulled out a briefcase and laid a document in front of him. The document exposed the financial loopholes of the Lin Group that I had uncovered. More serious than I expected, Melissa's embezzlement was only the tip of the iceberg. Ethan had long been secretly moving a lot of the company's assets in order to seize power. "President Lin, this is the due diligence I had someone do." I leaned back in the chair, tapping the desk with my fingers. "Lin Group's liabilities are 3 times more severe than what you publicly disclose, and I heard that the police are reinvestigating your father's car accident case." Ethan's face instantly turned deathly pale. He looked up at me suddenly, his eyes full of vigilance. Ethan said, "Miss Shun, what do you mean?" "It's not much." I picked up the coffee cup and took a slow sip. "I just feel that partnering with a company that could involve a case of manslaughter is too risky." But I changed the topic, pulling out another document from my briefcase. "If President Lin is willing to transfer 51% of Lin Group's shares to me, I'm not only willing to invest, I can also help you settle the trouble with the car accident case." Ethan's eyes widened, and he suddenly stood up, the chair legs screeching on the floor. Ethan said, "Miss Shun, you're taking advantage of a crisis, so what if I am?" I set down the coffee cup, my gaze ice cold as I looked at him. "Does General Manager Lin have any other choice right now? Either accept my terms, or wait for the Lin Group to go bankrupt, then go to jail to accompany Melissa." Mentioning Melissa, Ethan's face sank a bit more. I had already investigated clearly, although Melissa was rescued, because the evidence of embezzlement was conclusive. She has been put under residential surveillance by the police and is awaiting court trial. The reason Ethan still protects her now is only because Melissa still holds part of the evidence of him killing his father. The two are just mutually restraining each other. "I need time to think." Ethan sat back in the chair, his tone laced with a hint of struggle. "I give you 24 hours. I stood up, straightening my suit jacket. "At this time tomorrow, I want to see the equity transfer document. Otherwise, this financial loophole will appear on the desks of the Securities Regulatory Commission and the police." When I walked out of the meeting room, I saw Melissa sitting on the sofa in the corridor. She was wearing a designer suit, with a delicate makeup trying to cover the burns on her face. Seeing me come out, she stood up immediately and blocked my way. Melissa said, "Miss Shin, can we talk?" I raised my eyebrows and followed her into the adjacent lounge. Melissa closed the door, then turned to reveal a hideous face. Melissa said, "You are not a Chinese businessperson at all. Who are you? Why are you targeting Ethan?" I leaned against the wall and gave a cold laugh. "Miss Su, you can eat rice impulsively, but you shouldn't speak carelessly. I'm just a businessman who wants to invest. Enough pretending." Melissa stepped forward, eyes fierce. "Your eyes are too similar to Ava's. Are you Ava's relative? Are you here to avenge her?" I was startled inwardly. I didn't expect her to notice this, but on the surface I remained calm, pulled out my phone from my pocket, and played a recording. A conversation in which Melissa instigated Ethan to kill his father, extracted from a voice recorder found in the secret chamber. Melissa's face instantly went pale. She staggered back a step, bumped into the coffee table, and the teacup shattered on the floor. "You, how could you have this?" Her voice trembled, her eyes filled with fear. "How I got it doesn't matter." I tucked away my phone, stepping in front of her. "What matters is, if you don't want this recording to appear in court, persuade Ethan to tomorrow obediently sign the equity transfer agreement. Otherwise, you'll not only go to prison, but also be charged with inciting murder. And you'll never get out in this lifetime." Melissa sat slumped on the ground, tears streaming down her cheeks. Seeing her like this, I felt no pity at all, back then. When she crushed my hairpin in the attic, did she ever think she would end up like this today? I turned and left the lounge, leaving Melissa alone inside to break down in tears. The next morning, Ethan came to me with the share transfer document. His eyes were bloodshot, clearly having not slept at all night. He placed the share transfer document in front of me, his voice hoarse, and Ethan said, "Miss Shin, I can transfer the shares to you. But you must promise to help me and Manli get out of trouble." I picked up the equity transfer deed, read it carefully to ensure there were no problems, and signed the name Shin-chan. Then I placed a USB drive in front of him and said, "Inside is the reversal evidence for the car accident case, which can prove that the death of President Lin's father was an accident and has nothing to do with you. As for the case of Melissa embezzling funds, I've taken care of it. At most, she will receive a suspended sentence." Ethan picked up the USB drive, his fingers trembling as he plugged it into the computer. After seeing the so-called evidence, he clearly breathed a sigh of relief. What he didn't know was that those so-called reversal of facts evidence were all forged by me, just to temporarily steady him. Once I completely control the Lin Group, his good days with Melissa will come to an end. After becoming the largest shareholder of the Lin Group, I held the shareholders meeting under the identity of Shin-chan. At the meeting, I announced a series of reform plans, promoted a group of longtime employees loyal to Ethan's father, and sidelined all of Ethan's inner circle. Ethan, though still chairman, had become an empty shell with no real power in his hands. There was a time when I was dealing with documents in the office. Ethan knocked on the door. He held a cup of coffee in his hand, placed it on my desk. His tone with a hint of flattery. Ethan said, "Miss Shin, you've been working hard recently. I see you often stay late. I specially brewed a cup of coffee for you." I glanced at that cup of coffee, a cold smile in my heart. Is he trying to win me over, or does he want to tamper with the coffee? "Mr. Lin, please don't stand on ceremony." I didn't touch the cup of coffee. Instead, I pushed a document in front of him. "This is the company's latest personnel adjustment plan, Mr. Lin. Take a look and see if there's any problem." Ethan picked up the document, and his expression grew worse the more he looked. "I've reassigned all of his trusted aides to inconsequential posts, concentrating power entirely in my hands." "Miss Shin, what are you doing?" Ethan stood up abruptly, his tone carrying a hint of anger. "You promised me you would just invest and not interfere with the company's management." "President Lin, I am now the largest shareholder and have the right to decide the company's personnel arrangements." I leaned back in the chair, my gaze cold. "Moreover, these people are incompetent and no longer suitable for important positions. If President Lin is not satisfied, you can sell your shares to me and completely withdraw from the company." Ethan's face flushed red to the ears. He wanted to say something, but in the end he swallowed it back. He knew that right now he had no leverage to contend with me. He shot me a cold glare and slammed the door on his way out. Watching his departing silhouette, a cold smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. "Ethan, this is only the beginning. What you owe me, I will take back little by little." That night, I received a text from Melissa. The message contained only one sentence. "Ava, I know it's you. Don't get smug. I still have secrets you don't know." I looked at the text and felt no trace of panic. On the contrary, I found it quite interesting. "Melissa, what other secrets could she have? But it doesn't matter. No matter what the secret is, I can make it the final straw that breaks her." I replied to Melissa with a text, "Tomorrow at 3 in the afternoon. The top floor conference room at the company. If there's any secret, we'll discuss it face to face." I knew Melissa would certainly come. She's now like a cornered animal with no escape. As long as there's a glimmer of opportunity, she'll pounce and bite me. And I happened to be able to seize this chance to completely deal with her and Ethan. The next day at 3 in the afternoon, Melissa arrived at the conference room on time. She wore a black dress, heavy makeup on her face, and her eyes were filled with malice. As soon as she walked in, she threw an envelope in front of me. Melissa said, "Ava, this is the evidence that your brother Michael embezzled company funds. If you push me and Ziyi Yang again, I will expose this evidence to the public, and your brother will be ruined as well." I picked up the envelope. Inside were some bank transfer records and receipts. I glanced at them and knew immediately that they were all forged. My brother Michael is an upright person. How could he embezzle company funds? This must be Melissa and Ethan working together to forge them, intended to threaten me. Miss Sue, your tactic is too lousy. I threw the envelope back to her, sneering. These pieces of evidence are clearly forged. Do you think anyone would believe them? Moreover, even if they were real, I am now the largest shareholder of the Lin Group. I want to protect my brother. Who can stop me? Melissa's face suddenly turned pale. She didn't expect that I wouldn't fall for her ploy at all. She stepped forward, intending to pounce and hit me, but I was prepared, sidestepped, and then pressed the alarm on the table. Security quickly rushed in and subdued Melissa. Ava, you slut, I won't let you off. Melissa, being dragged out by the security guards, still swore crazily. I watched the back of her figure, a cold smile curling at the corner of my mouth. Melissa, the game is over. I picked up my phone and called Detective. I said, Detective, I have new evidence about Ethan and Melissa's murder case. Also, Melissa just tried to assault me a moment ago. You can come over. After hanging up, I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. Ethan, Melissa, your doom has truly arrived. Detective arrives with the officers. Melissa is still throwing a tantrum in the security room. When she sees the uniformed people come in, she immediately changes to a pitiful-looking posture and cries out, Police officers, she framed me. Ava, no, it's Shin-chan. She impersonated a overseas Chinese to swindle Lin's shares and even assaulted someone. I sat on the sofa to the side, calmly handing over the briefcase. Detective, here are 3 pieces of evidence. The first is a recording of Melissa instigating Ethan to murder his father. The second is the details of financial fraud and asset transfers by the Lin Group. The third is the surveillance footage of her just now attacking me. In addition, I must add one more thing, Ethan's so-called car crash exoneration. Evidence that he holds is forged by me. The purpose being to expose the real hit on asset transfers. Detective leafing through the evidence paused, then glanced up at me with a bit more respect. GU, or rather Miss Shin, your move is truly brilliant. We've long suspected Ethan shifted assets, but we haven't found a breakthrough. He waved his hand, and officers immediately stepped forward to Melissa handcuff her. She fought like crazy, nails scratching white marks on the floor, but was ultimately dragged away forcibly. Having taken care of the security room matters, I returned to the executive office on the top floor. I had just sat down for less than 5 minutes when the internal line on the desk rang. It was a voice from the front desk. President Shin, Mr. Ethan, and a few shareholders are in the meeting room and say there is something important they want to discuss with you, and they also said, if you don't go, they will leak the Shin-chan identity forgery matter to the media. I sneered coldly and tidied up my suit jacket. Ethan, certainly there were more tricks up his sleeve. But did he think this little chip could threaten me? I held the backup I left on purpose for forging retrial evidence, and pushed open the door into the meeting room. I saw Ethan sitting in the main seat, surrounded by 3 old shareholders he had long since bribed, each in front of them a copy of the doubtful identity of Shin-chan report. Miss Shin, no, I should call you Ava. Right, Ethan toyed with the pen in his hand, his tone full of self-satisfied arrogance. I've long suspected something was off about you. We've been investigating for half a month and finally found out you're not a Chinese overseas merchant at all. You used a false identity to steal shares, which is already suspicion of fraud. Now you have 2 choices. Either return the shares to me and compensate me 50 million in losses, or we shred our faces in front of the media, and then you and your brother will be ruined. Those shareholders chimed in as well. Shun. We're giving you face because you saved the Lin family. Don't be ungrateful. Exactly, identity fabrication is a big deal. If this goes to the CSRC, you'll never get away with it. I didn't rush to speak, but tossed the backup retrial evidence copy onto Ethan in front of him. Then opened my phone to play a recording, a conversation from the last time he signed the stock transfer documents, where he admitted, the car accident back then was my plan, as long as I can keep the shares. I'll accept fake evidence. The meeting room instantly fell silent. %Ethan%'s face turned from smug to ashen, and the pen in his hand fell with a clatter onto the table. "Ethan, you think only you know how to investigate people." I walked up to him. Looking down on him from above, "You've got the transfer records of shareholders you bribed, the proof of 30 million in assets secretly moved overseas. I have all of it. As for identity forgery, I did use the Shin-chan identity, but the share transfer agreement was signed by you willingly, and the funds I invested come from legitimate sources. Compare that to you, inciting murder, financial fraud, embezzlement. Which one isn't enough to sentence you to life imprisonment?" The shareholders who saw this immediately changed their expressions and pushed aside the so-called points of doubt in front of them. "President Shin, we were deceived by Ethan. Yes, we are willing to testify. He has long wanted to transfer company assets." Ethan suddenly stood up, trying to rush over to hit me, but was held back by security guards who had arrived after the news. He reddened his eyes and roared, "Ava, I will not rest in peace even after death, dying to be a ghost. You don't deserve it." I pulled out my phone and, in front of him, dialed Interpol. "Hello, is this Officer Wang? Regarding Ethan establishing shells abroad to move assets, I have a complete chain of evidence now. I'm sending it to you." After hanging up, I looked at Ethan's completely desperate face and added, "Forgot to tell you, my brother already helped me contact Interpol. Your overseas assets will soon be frozen and recovered." When the police officers arrived again, Ethan was already slumped in the chair, his eyes empty. When they put the handcuffs on him, he suddenly looked up at me and asked, "Ava, where exactly am I inferior to you? What gives you the right to take away everything I own?" I looked at him calmly and said, "It's not that you're inferior to me. You never truly possessed anything in the first place. The Lin family was your father's blood and effort, not yours. My love was given freely by me, not something you deserve. What you've lost is all something you ruined with your own hands. For the next 3 months, I will preside over the operations of the Lin Group under the identity of Shin-chan, while coordinating with the police to handle the case. Melissa, for instigating murder, embezzlement, and intentional injury, was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Ethan, for multiple offenses including intentional murder, financial fraud, and embezzlement, was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole after multiple penalties were combined. All of his assets overseas were recovered, filling the company's financial gaps. On the day of the judgment, I didn't go to the court. Instead, I went with Aunt Jong to my father and Ethan's father's grave. The grass in front of the tombstones was neatly trimmed. I placed a bouquet of white chrysanthemums in front of the 2 graves and whispered, "Dad, Uncle Lin, the bad people have all been punished. I will help my brother take care of the Lin family and won't let it be ruined by anyone." Mrs. Jong wiped away her tears on the side. "Miss, you can finally let go." I smiled, sunlight shining on my face, warm and solid. The hatred of the past 2 years had pressed like a huge boulder on my heart. Now the boulder has fallen, and I can finally breathe easily. Back at the company, I held a shareholders' meeting to publicly reveal the identity of Shin-chan, and at the same time announced my resignation from the position of group president, with my brother Michael officially taking over. The shareholders were shocked at first, then applauded. After these months together, they had long recognized my abilities and admired my breadth of mind. "I know you might be wondering why I'm doing this." I stood on the stage, looking at the familiar faces below. "In fact, taking over the Lin family has never been about power. It's just to give the dead a statement, to give those who were hurt a voice. Now that the goal has been achieved, I should go and do what I truly want to do." After the meeting, my brother patted my shoulder and said, "Wonwan, whatever you want to do, your brother will support you. I'll keep an eye on the foundation's affairs for you." I nodded, filled with gratitude. The little girl who once needed my brother's protection can now stand on her own, and can also protect her family in turn. A month later, with only a simple suitcase, I went to a remote mountainous area. I funded the construction of a girls' school there and personally taught the children. Seeing those eyes hungry for knowledge, I suddenly understood that true revenge has never been to drag the other party into hell, but to live a more meaningful life myself. using my own strength to warm the hearts of more people. One night, I received a letter from the prison, written by Ethan. The handwriting on the letter was sloppy and distorted, only a few short sentences. Ava, I think about it every day in prison. If only I hadn't met you back then. I lost unfairly, but I admit, I'm not as good as you. I placed the letter on the candle and lit it. Watching it turn to ashes and drift out the window, in the moonlight, the distant mountains roll on, and soft snores come from the children's sleep. A small, relieved smile curves at the corners of my mouth, and I murmur, Ethan, I have long ceased to hate you. I am just very glad that I have finally become the person I want to be. Later, someone asked me what the 2-year-long imprisonment and revenge had left in me. I pointed to the children running in the school and smiled, saying, it left me courage, it left me kindness. And it gave me the ability to love this world again. The sunset sinks, and the golden light pours onto the glass of the teaching building, reflecting dazzling brilliance. I know that the past darkness has completely dispersed, and every day in the future will be fresh and bright. Alright, that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. We'll keep updating with more exciting stories, and we look forward to seeing you next time.